Welcome to the space between heaven on earth. This is a companion podcast to Awakening Heaven on Earth, created as a space for reflection, conversation, and lived experience. Here, we enter the pause between knowing and becoming, between insight and embodiment, between heaven and earth. These conversations are not about answers or conclusions. They are about presence, about listening, about reasoning together, about meeting one another honestly in the unfolding journey of awakening. I'm your host, Jeffrey Aylor. Again, welcome and thank you for entering the space between with us. Welcome to this episode of The Space Between. In our last episode, we explored healing the family, the first circle of love, the place where many of us first experienced connection, belonging, sometimes separation. And today we're going to expand that circle beyond ourselves, beyond our families, and into community. This episode is called Belonging Together, Unity in Communities. Because one of the deepest needs that we all have, every human being has, is to belong, to know I matter, I have a place, I'm not alone. And yet many people today are surrounded by others, but still feel deeply disconnected. So today we're going to explore and dive into what creates true community. How do we create spaces where people could feel seen, they can be valued, and how do we move from simply existing near each other to truly belonging together, being connected as we know we truly are? So I'm going to start this with asking a question for each one of you that are with us today. And by the way, we have my son Joel back with us today, which is great to have him back in conversation with us. We have Purna Devi, and we have Joe Dermody. And each one of you, I want you to take a few moments. And when you hear the word community, what comes up for you? Is there a time in your life when you felt you truly belonged somewhere?
Well, when I hear community, I think of the yogic experience. And the word yoga comes actually from the root word yug in Sanskrit, which is union, to unify, to yoke together. Mm-hmm. And we also have this word sangha, right? So sangha is a community of like-minded people that sit in the truth. And so for me, I have done a lot of, I've had a lot of experience in community in these spiritual settings. But I have also found that ego follows us wherever we go. And so sometimes people can believe that, oh, you get in these spiritual circles and judgment doesn't arise and ego isn't present. But really, I think in any circle you find mirrors for ourselves. And so for me, community is really about having space to be my authentic self while also being held accountable, right? I think the greatest community for me are people that can hold me in my tender spaces and also be really honest with me and have the ability to mirror to me maybe certain aspects that I can't observe for myself.
Yeah, well said. I don't have a whole lot more I can add to that. I think biggest thing, belonging is not the absence of difference. It's the absence of exclusion. So it's basically not trying to just fit in, but actually being able to authentically feel like you belong in an area or with people in certain groups of settings, things like that. So,
yeah, just being with a group of like-minded people where you feel loved and you feel the ability to love back. So, and it can be people. I think it can be your pets. I think it can be yourself in nature. I know that sounds a little bit weird when you think of community, but I think having a place where you can sit with yourself and feel a oneness, but know that there's others beings, maybe not human beings, but other beings around you in nature is still part of your community.
Well, the word itself, if you think about it and break it down, is common unity. What creates a common connection? I know it, outside of family, your neighborhood can be a community. You're connected to people in your neighborhood. You're connected to people within the city that you live in or the area that you live in geographically. Community could be based on common ideas or interests. Work is a community. This morning, as I was sitting outside by my pond, listening to the water run and meditating, my fish and I became a community as I sat there and watched them and went to go feed them, and they get so excited. And it just creates a connection with that. Again, to Joe's point, it doesn't have to be human beings. It can be nature. It can be animals. It can be spirits. I believe that there's a spirit community, the community of souls and spirits that we interact with. So, I think the biggest thing for me is learning to expand my thought about the communities that I actually belong to and can enjoy in life. So that's a good foundation, I think, for the discussion we're going to have today. And as we jump into these reflection questions, again, we're going to do these in different parts. And this first part, we're going to jump into, first, we're going to talk about what's the experience of belonging. Can you describe a place, a group, or a moment where you felt like you truly belonged? You weren't just there, you truly belonged.
Well, I kind of want to go a bit existential with this and then hone in a bit, right? And so we are made up of stars and the cosmos, and right, we have that same energy pulsating within us as the stars do. And so just by our very existence, there is the essence of belonging woven into the fact that we are here existing. And then we get programmed and conditioned, and duality, sets in, and the idea of this and that separates us. But think, we all came through a mother, and that was our first sense of belonging in the physical realm. And then we come earthside and the womb gets cut. And like Thich Nhat Hanh says, once that umbilical cord gets cut, there is an illusion of separateness created. And I had a trauma teacher once say, if you can ground into the present moment and just notice gravity and your gravitational force, that is a remembrance of your belonging. That is an example of secure attachment. We always belong wherever we are, but we forget that, right? And we have this illusion of separateness. And so to answer your question, right, I think belonging is an act of remembrance, of removing the illusion of separateness, of duality. And my senses really confuse that, because I can perceive myself in this body and I'm here, and then I perceive you and you're there. And so there's a really difficult distortion, I think, to overcome. And so a lot of folks feel like they don't belong because we forget that our inherent existence is, in fact, belonging. And we're pack animals, right? We don't live in caves. We don't live in isolation. We live in relation to one another.
Yeah, I just listened to Alan Watts the other day talk about how we look at a tree and we see it attached to the earth, so we assume it's just part of the earth, and that because we can move along the earth and not be attached to it, and that we're actually separate from it, but we're not. So we're actually just part of the earth, just like a tree is. But for me, one of the deepest experiences I ever had, have a sense of belonging to a community, was right after my sister was killed. It was a very painful time, but it was also the first time that I saw the power of community. People showed up without having to be asked. I had friends and classmates and neighbors, people I didn't even realize that cared that much, show up. So in the middle of the grief that we were all experiencing, they all came and had this basically the same sense of belonging. And it wasn't because we had done anything to deserve it or earned it or anything like that. They just basically were there. They're willing to sit with us in our pain, and that was something that was extremely profound, because our house was just enveloped with people from all over the area that had heard about it. So sometimes we see this connectedness when things get hard. It's not always when it's life's going well. When things get difficult, that's when you start to see the power of the people around you and the connectedness you have with people.
That's almost when you see some of the true community, right? It's in those most difficult times. A lot of people will avoid you. We know that.
Yeah.
As much as people came,
right.
Many people that we expected to be here avoided us.
You saw how uncomfortable they were.
Because they were so incredibly uncomfortable with what we were going through and themselves and what they were thinking and feeling that, yet, you're right, it really was a sense of community that you could, it's very difficult to even describe it, what we experienced. Yeah.
But yeah, it was just to see the people who did come. It was like, they're here. Wow. It's just, it wasn't what who we would have expected to be there, but they were there.
Right.
So,
yeah. Good example.
I have two. And the first one is a larger community. And that's when we went to an FC Bayern game last year. And that was a pretty awesome event. And it wasn't just the local community that showed up, but it was kind of a global community that showed up. And it was a community of like-minded people that came together to experience this soccer game, but we were all there for a common cause. But what amazed me was not only the outpouring of the emotion, the love that we felt for this one team, but then how much love and excitement that we showed for the opposing team, that our team just really, we were way overpowered to be playing this team. We outscored them by a very large amount. The other team played their heart out. They played a very good game, just not at the same level as FC Bayern. And the amount of we still cheered for them. And it was amazing. By the end of the game, you still wanted them to score. You wanted them to play hard. And even FC Bayern, they still wanted them to play well too. It was just the sportsmanship, the camaraderie between the two teams was fantastic. And everybody in the stadium still felt that too. And it was just a great event where just a lot of love shown in that stadium. And
I thought what was cool as well was how all the fan clubs and stuff from the area came together. Complete strangers, never seen them before in our lives, but we all love this team and we all know that shared experience. Yeah. And all of a sudden, we're no longer strangers. Now we're family.
You felt like family, and I think that's a huge part of community.
Yeah.
The other one I wanted to share, and this is one of my, things that really, stick in my heart. I have a core group of friends that I met early on in college. A few of them I met in high school, and we loved to go camping. We've now all split and gone our own separate ways. But if I bring this, up to any of them, yeah, I know a smile comes to our face, and we think of it, and we're there again. We used to go camping all the time at Red River Gorge down in Kentucky. And there's a spot that we go to. We did this probably 10, 12 times throughout our college career. And, just being down there together for a weekend, a long weekend, the holidays, will make us all just think about that. And there's times when we just would share the togetherness, the being outdoors together. That's huge for us. So that small community that we had and still do.
Well, I love these examples because obviously when you're sitting here having discussions about spiritual things, one of the first communities people are going to think about is church. And, the one thing that I grew up in church. To me, church was a big part of life. Those people are still, in many ways, and I look back and think about our church community, still many fond memories, not all fond, most of them though. And the whole concept of church, ecclesia, right, is it's designed, for people to be together. And I think one of the things sometimes when we start to go into this awakening process is that we're in the process of, say, deconstructing Christianity that we're coming from or out of or trying to understand from a different perspective, is that we tend to isolate ourselves for a while and forget that, wait a minute, there's still some really important value in the community, in the being together. In fact, what are we doing right now?
Same thing.
Are we not in community?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be very honest, I don't think I look forward to much more during the week than this time we spend together in the mornings here having these discussions about these topics and about life and about circumstance. So to me, you all are one of my sweet and dear communities. And I don't get to share this with everybody. Not everybody is interested in these topics or is wants to have the types of discussions that you all are willing to have.
And I saw a card yesterday that kind of highlights exactly what you just said. Because you can't have a butterfly discussion with caterpillar people.
Okay,
It's
true.
Kind of a cool way of looking at it. They're just not. It's not that they're not going to eventually find us. It's just they're not quite ready.
They're not there. It's not time, and that connection is strong and it's beautiful, and there are people who would seek to destroy that. And I hope that we can, that bond can be strong enough that, even when we face resistance from time to time, that we're willing to stick together, because this is what belonging feels like to me.
If I can speak to my present moment experience, all of my beloved family here knows that I'm going through something very difficult and someone is seeking, right? To dismantle the community that I am a part of professionally and personally, that I have worked for over 15 years, right, to create and to manifest. And, I've had these really potent moments of fear that this community might look at me differently or turn against me or feel some type of way. And the beauty through the difficulty that I'm currently going through is I've had people reach out that I haven't heard from in years and remind me of what an important part of their journey I've been, or just, right, folks reaching out. Joe sent me an email last week and said, hey, I am here, whatever you need, right? And all of you have reached out in ways and just reminded me of who I am amidst this bit of a witch trial, if you will. Someone, trying to create a level of harm in the integrity and the character. And you all have just reflected that so deeply in moments where, it's easy to forget who you are because someone so aggressively is telling you you're something else. And so thank you. Yeah, thank you for reminding me how important this community is and how important community is during painful times, right? It's some of those times where people really show up, and unexpected people, like Joel said, show up in your corner to reflect who you are and to help you ground into that remembrance of belonging.
Well, I think that really then leads us nicely into this next question around being seen, truly being seen. What's the difference between just being accepted because you fit in versus belonging because you're truly seen. You're truly seen for the core and essence of who you are.
I've always thought that about duality, right? And about the shadow and the light. And people love us when we're shiny and we're bright and we're bringing goodness, or we're elevating the situation. And I've always thought real belonging, real community, real connection is being able to see me in my shadows and still loving me there, still embracing me, still holding me, right? Because we all have the desire to be seen, but then we have this shame culture, right, that wants us to hide those unsavory parts of us and only lead with the shiny parts or the palatable parts. And life is gritty, man, right? Like there is a grittiness to the reality of humanity. And so I think true belonging is being able to hold one another in our shadows and our lights and still loving us there.
Yes, to me, fitting in a group often requires you to be adaptable. You have to constantly monitor yourself. You have to make sure that you are toeing the line, doing the right things in order to fit in. True belonging allows you to be authentically you. When you belong, you can relax. It's not stressful. And so, just being accepted, just fitting in makes you feel like you're allowed to stay. You're allowed to be in this group. You're good enough to be in this group. Where belonging says you don't have to pretend. You can just be you. And I think that's huge. And to your point, Purna, you talked about life isn't always just the good stuff. It's not always just pretty. It's not always nice. People are real. They have a dark side. We have shadows. I think that's one place where modern, say, Christianity, when it's just this comes from our background, where that seems like we always want it to be pretty. We want to put on our best face. We don't look the best to everybody. We want to show our best side. We don't want to show our darkness and our shadows. But that's where we actually need the help. And I think that was exactly what Jesus was talking about. It's like, you all have the life that you religious people, you're fine, you're good. I'm here to help the people who need help in this world that we've got. I'm going to be with the people in their shadows, in their darkness, and help them improve their life. That was the whole point of his ministry. And I think that's just one thing that we've got wrong again, is that we're constantly just wanting to see the best in people. We turn on TV and we see mega churches worth billions of dollars and stuff. And it's like, that's not true. That's not true life. To truly belong, you have to sit with them in their dark places. And it's scary, because to be your authentic self with somebody you basically you're vulnerable, and people don't like to be vulnerable.
And I like how you said fitting in is the idea that we will allow you to be here, right? There's a conditionality and an exclusivity.
Right. You have to earn the acceptance.
You have to earn it, right? You have to fall in line.
And that's just going to cause you to be stressful or worry all the time.
Well, to me, that's where we start crossing into religion, right? Religion is what defines these rules and the image that we're supposed to present and the the way we're supposed to look, if you don't look a certain way or act a certain way. It's so funny because I can clearly see times where I've been in a congregational setting in a Christian church, and people are looking around to see
What are they doing?
what are they doing,
Should I do that
then they need to do that too.
Yeah.
I'm gonna raise my
Because you
arm
know.
when I'm singing because
Yeah.
everybody else is raising their hands when they're singing.
Right. Not because I
And-
truly feel it.
Yeah. So you get into this religiosity versus spirituality, which is to me is the true essence or experience that we're seeking. And it has nothing to do with how you dress, what kind of hairstyle you have. I had one person when I was up among the primitive Baptist people that said, well, you don't look like a primitive Baptist. And I'm looking to myself, I'm like, well, what does that mean? What am I supposed to look like? We're not the Amish. You think of the Amish and it's like, well, if we're supposed to look like an Amish person, what am I supposed to look like?
Maybe.
Pentecostals, they have a look. You can't tell me they don't have a look. And if you don't look that way, you don't fit in.
Right.
You're now going to be excommunicated or ostracized or put aside. Well, you can apply that in a lot of different ways. If I don't act exactly the way you want me to act, or if to our point, acknowledge the reality of who we are. I think what most people, if you really come to know me, will tell you, I am who I am. And I am the way I am, whether I'm here in my home or whether I'm at work or whether I'm in a church setting, or it doesn't matter. I'm going to be who I am. And if you don't like that, I love you anyway. As I always like to say, I'll forgive you. Right? I'll forgive you for not liking me. That's okay. It's perfectly okay. But I am who I am. And it used to be.
I think some of that is just fitting in is conditional, and belonging is unconditional sometimes. And that's what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah.
It's belonging is unconditional. And it's hard though. Sometimes sometimes it's not as easy. Sometimes it's the easiest thing in the world. I think it depends on what group you're in. Because, and what I mean by that is, sometimes to belong, you have to let go of things that are not easy to let go of. Because if you're going to belong in a group, and even the group of your closest friends, you have to build relationships, and relationship building isn't always easy. And in order to truly belong, you have to accept people for who they are and allow yourself to be accepted. And until you can really do that, I don't think you're going to truly belong. And that is not always easy.
Well, you can't truly be seen if you're not being truly who you are. Right.
Right.
And I think Purna has touched on, the circumstance she's going through. And I'd also think back in my Christian foundations about, to Joel's point, about how Jesus approached people and who he approached and who he spent time with, that other people were judging him and saying, well, you shouldn't be spending time with publican tax collectors and sinners. And he's like, well, who do you think you are? You must be a judgmental group of people because you wouldn't say that. Right. And again, here's this religious group making all of these judgments. And this is why people are struggling right now with organized religion, is because they have created a false sense of being. And people live a very stressful life trying to conform to that and stay in conformance to it because it's not who they truly are in some cases. And they're afraid to openly express who they are and what they think. That's one of the reasons why I'm finding this to be liberating. And I think this is why churches are struggling, because people are wanting to be themselves. They want to be their true being. And I want to be with them. That's who I want to say. That's who I'm finding. That's where I'm finding community at this point. It's not that I don't love the people that are going to these churches. I do. I absolutely do. But to your point, Joel, they are where they are, and it's okay. I don't want to be judgmental of their circumstance because I've been them.
Yep.
I have been them.
Yep.
So who am I to say anything about anybody doing anything? Sorry, it just, that I have matured. I have actually matured and developed, I think, a little bit. So boy, just like with most of our discussions, we can just go on and on and on within some of these questions and have just one episode around just one question. But we want to start into this next line of thinking around, people are isolated in a connected world. Here we are in one of the most technologically connected times in history. Yet I think people feel more isolated and disconnected than ever. It's counterintuitive. You would think that we would be absolutely one with all the technology available to us, and we're not. So there's something now, I'm going to call it modern loneliness. Why do you think so many people feel so disconnected, even when we have more ways to communicate than ever?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier about humans being pack animals. And we are also in a time where modern technology and modern life has disconnected us from the truth that we're not just a part of nature, but we are nature. And those two realities butting up against this high speed, I can connect with anyone technologically anywhere in the world at my fingertips. There's this overwhelm of this false illusion of connection that continues to take us deeper and deeper into the fissure, into the separateness of being pack animals, being in, think about, tribal communities, and sacred communities that sit together, they commune physically with one another, right? We're there with one another. We can touch one another. We can, be in the physical presence of one another and be in nature together. And so I think a lot of this modern loneliness comes from the inherent disconnection from self, the disconnection from nature, our first mother, right? The earth mother, and our connection from physical spaces. And I get, right? I've had this conversation with many people, we have disabilities. And so some folks would say, if I'm unable to get out of the home, my only connection is the virtual one. Or in 2020, right? When COVID hit, for example, we transitioned to a virtual community. And it, I think, has only gotten worse from there. And a lot of folks feel very separated and feel very disconnected because of the extreme level of technology that's just replaced organic community connection.
Yeah, it's almost made us a hybrid species.
Yeah, it really has.
Where we're part human, part technology.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've become incredibly connected informationally, but really disconnected relationally. We don't have the relationships like we do. We're fully bombarded with information, but relationally we struggle. And what we're lacking is that actual presence of the other person. And from what I'm just watching, say, my son grow up as, he's an 18-year-old kid now. That's a man now. He's an adult. But he's had the technology in his hand since he was 8. And everything he does goes through that device. Every decision he makes goes through that device. That's why I said he's almost like a hybrid species. And it's really stunted him, socially. And he had issues, certain ways relationally to begin with, but it made it even worse because he felt like it was a replacement. It was something he could just use and he could survive using this device. And I think back, I'm at that age now where I'm like, in my day, this is what I did, right? I'm already there. But in my day, with my friends, we were constantly together, physically present with one another, always at each other's houses, running around outside together. Now, if I asked my son to go just next door to his best friend's house and see what he was up to, it would freak him out. He would not be able, he does not want to do it. It makes him extremely uncomfortable. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with a lot of this is that people like to be comfortable. And having this technology makes things easy. We don't have to do much. We don't have to put ourselves out there. We don't have to look at the person in the eye and ask an uncomfortable question. We don't like to have that uncomfortable feeling. And because we especially, we're going to have an entire generation full of it, where they want to just communicate virtually through their devices, and it's sad.
I think the algorithm also creates these echo chambers, which only perpetuates the duality and the divisiveness. Because if I'm getting everything fed to me through this technology, it is going to continue to narrow to what I am already experiencing. So there's no diversity.
Right.
There's no alternative opinions for me to consider in community. It's just going to feed me the same thing, which is only going
to drive home what you already are.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think it stunts growth in that way.
Absolutely.
Too. And the beauty of diversity and community, it just does not challenge that whatsoever.
Right. And that's why you see people who are just constantly, putting stuff out there about their opinions. And they're not considering everybody else's. They're saying, this is my opinion. It's rampant. It's everywhere.
So I'm going to be the one that takes the other side now.
Cool.
So both, but I'm going to do both here, because my first thing that I have written here about this is the reason people are feeling the disconnection is loneliness, right? So I agree that it's loneliness, and it's because of the lack of love and personal connection. So I do agree. However, I think that the technology we have can be a valuable tool. So the tool would allow us to connect with many people, right? And many diverse people that we normally wouldn't be able to connect in our local community if it's used correctly. So I think part of it is being able to get the knowledge and the education on how to communicate with those other people, and then have the will to do so. Okay. The other side of it too, that I've been thinking about as we're communicating here right now, is with Reiki. So, a lot of people are like, well, you can't have that physical connection. You can't share the energy that you've got around when you're all together. Well, I've learned that that's not true, because I have had Reiki sessions where they have been virtual, and I will tell you, you can share energy at a distance, not being there in person with each other. So that is also something that can be learned and taught and experienced remotely. But again, it's something that we have to learn how to do. So again, to your point, where we're almost hybrid beings now, I think we are. I think this is also something that we could always do, but now it's a mental shift that we have to pick up, teach, and learn how to do in order to be successful at it. So again, I think that's why we're all here. We're learning something new. We're learning how to hone new skills or forgotten skills. And it'll be interesting. It's an interesting time to be around. And we got some learning to do, some remembering to do.
Well, just like with anything, it's technology can be a two-edged sword. I find that in most every case, the technology, if it's used and learned effectively, can be it can accelerate, it can actually exponentially increase or improve your ability to connect. And if we truly believe that we are all one, then that connection exists, even if we're not in proximity, right? This is the right. I love proximity because it's easier, but not every time is that connection within proximity to one another. I'm sorry, but I can feel people all over the world And what I love about this technology that we're using to create this podcast is it's allowing us to connect with people in multiple countries all over the world. It's not something that I have to say, this is only in this geographical location that this is touching people. And I think that's wonderful because I come from a big world anyway. I've traveled extensively. I love travel. I love all the various cultures that I've had the opportunity to experience and the people in them. And that illusion, again, is of separation. We believe we're separate. And we limit the concept of connecting, right? The problem is when you outsource your thinking, you outsource your reasoning to it,
right,
and let it dictate to you how you're going to think or what you should think or what information you're going to take in or not take in. And at that point, you've limited the technology. The technology actually, AI, we can have just an entire episode on artificial intelligence, which I believe is just a microcosm of divine intelligence, which is all-knowing. To me, it's like a little miniature version of the Akashic records, right? That we all actually have the ability to tap into. We just don't do it and don't know how to take advantage of that ability. Or our intent is not true or pure or clean in the way that we want to do it. And I do think people are outsourcing. They're outsourcing their relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how bold people are when they hide behind technology. That's exactly what Purna is dealing with right now. Is she's dealing with someone who is working in anonymity and through whatever means is bold. They're bold when they're not standing in front of somebody, and they don't have to look, like you say, look them in the eye, and stand up and defend a position that they're taking. At this point, they put you on the defense, and they just sit back and kind of enjoy the circus that they've created, right? And unfortunately, I think that specific circumstance, Purna, that I think you're going through is the result of somebody who's experiencing this modern loneliness and has a very deep internal issue, and they're projecting horribly out, right? And it's unfortunate, but they picked the wrong target.
I like amen to that.
Right.
Yeah. They thought that they were going to break us. They picked the wrong witch to take to the gallows, so to speak, because the community is showing up 10 toes down. So that's a beautiful thing. But I like how Joe mentioned, the other side of this. And I think that technology in these connections, because again, we're here in this platform, right? Connecting via technology. And so I think it's in addition to, right? Not as a replacement of these also organic relational experiences we need as pack animals.
Yeah, right. Use it to augment, not to replace.
Yeah.
Again, I don't like to see people totally outsource, right? They're outsourcing.
Right. They're outsourcing their relationships.
And that's not going to work for you long term. We've seen this issue in business where people want to outsource knowledge and capabilities, and what happens is they lose their total identity. They lose their identity as an organization or as a business because now they no longer have that knowledge internal to themselves. They've given it away. We've given it away, and that can be dangerous to your experience and to the fulfillment of your life and your being and such. I want to jump into this next question because I think, Joel, you've actually alluded to it already, and that's the concept of vulnerability. Because it's very difficult to be in true community and not allow, if you can't be vulnerable and open and express feelings and thoughts and experiences with people, then they really don't know you, to be very honest. They see a version of what you're trying to show them, but they really don't know you. So why is it sometimes so difficult to allow ourselves to be truly known?
I think because we have these cultural and religious programs and conditionings that have us rejecting parts of ourselves. And so if I am to be truly seen, that means I have to first stop disowning these parts of myself that through my purity culture conditioning or my religious conditioning or my, familial conditioning tell me is wrong. So there has to be a level of self-acceptance so that I can show up and be seen in my vulnerable essence that is more whole and less fragmented.
It hits the nail on the head. In order to not feel vulnerable, you have to know who you are first. Because if you're not comfortable with yourself, you're really going to be very uncomfortable trying to be yourself to somebody else. So you have to know who you are and be comfortable with and sit with yourself, know who you are, be okay with the good and the bad. Otherwise, it's going to be very uncomfortable in the interaction you have with somebody else.
And why is that difficult? Because it takes time and effort. It's not easy. Most people don't know how to do that. So yeah, it's hard. We just don't know how.
Right. And the programming and all that conditioning that we have is, all that shame built around who we are. We think we have to be something specific, but it's okay to be who you are right now. And whatever you've got going on inside yourself is okay. And but we're not okay sitting with that. We're not okay sitting in that shame, or not even shame, because the shame is all self-inflicted.
Right.
Since it keeps coming up, this situation that I'm going through, right? This person is writing letters and claiming I'm doing certain things and also has woven truths, right? I have a criminal history. I've done really stupid things and I've paid the price for them. And, I've gone through really human suffering and I've made human mistakes. And part of this person's angle is that makes me a fraud in the healing community. And I want, I just want to express how deeply interesting that is as it comes up in this conversation, because everyone has reflected to me, that's why we love you, because you're human, right? And I always joke that the greatest healers, are the greatest sinners, right? The most prolific saints have been through hell and back. We have been with the shadow. We know that place well. And because we have come out on the other side and we don't judge and we love unconditionally, because there's nothing you can tell me that you've done that I don't, that I hold judgment against. So those are the safest places, I think. And sometimes these experiences make us the best space holders and healers, because we know what it's like to live in shame, to be shamed, to own our mistakes and to heal from those, and then to hold space for others to do that too.
It's interesting because when I left the religious group that I had been raised among, had been ordained among, who I'd served for many, many years, the Primitive Baptist family of people, we went after that. And I got a little backstory because, my wife and I, after our daughter was killed in a car accident, we went different directions. We've always gone in different directions, to be very honest, over 43 years. Religious wise and beliefs and various things like that, which is okay. And we accept that. We accept that we're in different places and positions and have different experience. But at that point, she was not able to go to church. She could not. She just wasn't there. She was angry with God, to be very honest. And I get that.
Fair, yeah.
Right? So after all the years that I was going to church, she was not going. I just knew it was time. It was time for me to do and go and be out in the world. If what I believed was what I was seeing was true, then I needed to have it out in the world and not in this tiny little group or of people that
In your silo.
I was in my silo and I
Mhm.
was just comfortable because that's what I knew and blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of that and I'm going to go into the world and just spread my wings a little bit. And so we started going to an evangelical church here locally. And, and my wife really enjoyed that. She enjoys that, the social elements, the social aspects of that. Well, one of the things that they did that was new to me, wasn't new, it was not something I would have done among a primitive Baptist people, was called a community group. And it's ended up being a wonderful experience because, quite honestly, even though many of us now don't even attend that church, we still consider ourselves a community group. And we love each other and we support each other and we accept each other's position even as they change. And this is one of the parts I think people struggle with in community is you've got to allow people to change. People have to be able to change and grow and learn. And it's okay that they go and have this experience, whether it's good, bad, doesn't matter. They're learning. This life is all about learning. And, so to me, the hard part about that, though, was this: to do that, you have to be vulnerable. You have to open up and let people know what you think and what you believe. Well, let me tell you what, my belief system was totally different than everybody in this community group. I knew it. I knew going in, but I was going to be who I was and I was going to share what I thought and what I believed. And you know what? It is, even though this group no longer is formally together, we are all informally together. And they allowed me to share. And all the things we're talking about were things I would bring up. And a lot of them, from an evangelical point of view, would look at me like I had two heads and a tail. But still, they allowed me to share that. And in many cases, I think a lot of us have grown over these several years that we've been together. And I think that's the purpose of this podcast. That's the purpose of this work that we're trying to do. There is no, I don't have all the answers. I'm seeking. I want to know. I learn by talking and communicating with people. All of you teach me something every time we get together. Every time.
I'd say you lucked into a good group of people there, but it's not really luck. I think it happened on
totally.
purpose.
It was totally.
You had a group of people who were extremely emotionally mature, who were seeking themselves. They just didn't actually have anybody to push them to continue asking the questions the way they felt it. But they were open to everything. They may not always agree with where you were or what you were talking about, but they considered it. They had digested it themselves and looked to see if it was true.
So what is the glue? What is the glue that held that together? It's love. It's unconditional love. If they knew, even though my position was significantly different than what they believe, they know that I was coming at it from a position of love.
Right. And they allowed, that group basically allowed disagreement. It didn't affect how you viewed one another as humans. You're okay to disagree, but still get along.
And
that's one thing that's we struggle with in this world. It's very divisive. And if you don't agree with what I think, then I have nothing to do with you. I can't be around you. I can't talk to you. Can't participate. And that's not how this is supposed to be. You're allowed to disagree, but that does not change your humanity.
But you guys felt like you belonged in that group and you just didn't fit in, right? So, because you didn't have requirements to be in that group, you guys.
We know.
That's a small group.
That's right.
But the thing is, I still fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I still fit in, although it was obvious that I've always been different, though. I've had to know that about myself. My personality is different. It's very, very unique.
Mm-hmm.
It was probably one of the greatest awakening, one of the earliest parts of my awakening process was when I came to the understanding that I have a very unique personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I am who I am. I'm not going to apologize for it, but I acknowledge that I know I'm different. I know that. And but again, love is the foundation. If you do these things, and we're going to touch on this in some of the other questions we'll get into, but it really is, love is the essence or the glue that is what allows unity to happen.
Mhm.
That's why after this first season, Unity, in this podcast series, the next season is love. And it's not just love, it's about unconditional love. There's a difference, big difference. And we'll obviously dig into that very deeply in the next season. So let's I really want to talk about authentic, being authentic in community. It's more than agreement. It's more than just being in agreement. You have to be present in this community, right? And people have to feel safe. They have to feel like the space that you're in this community is a safe place, right? So what qualities create a safe place for people to feel safe enough to be authentic or to be vulnerable or to be open in a way that allows that community to thrive?
I think we've already touched on so many of the ingredients required for safe spaces, right? We know that belonging does not require sameness. It requires us to stay connected when we disagree. We honor one another's humanity and the diversity of that humanity. But that doesn't mean we always agree with one another. But I can hold space because I hold space for my belief system. And I can hold space for your belief system. So I think it requires, one, each individual person feeling safe within themselves so that we can show up with that V word, vulnerability, and to allow other people to show up in theirs, right? So there's a level of non-judgment in that sense of belonging and in that sense of safe space, that I can say something that you might not agree with, but you're not going to disconnect from me. You're not going to shame me. You're not going to pull the plug on my humanity, right? We can still be in relation to one another and not always see eye to eye, but have that unconditional loving presence there.
Yeah, exactly. The safest environments aren't the ones without mistakes. It's the one where if the mistakes happen, it doesn't threaten my belonging. So basically, you can be yourself. And an example of that, like a little small example of that, honestly, is the little soccer team that I coach. And this little group of girls who basically are, learning the sport. They're learning to be a unit. They're learning to come together. But they make mistakes sometimes. But they're always worried about their performance. Is that going to threaten anything? Are they going to be mad at me for it? Is my coach going to be upset? They make a mistake and they look at me right away, and they're looking to make sure that they're still okay. And it's always, you have to stay positive. Kids are very vulnerable in that state, and they want to know, am I doing this right? And if I make a mistake, is that okay? Yes. You have to be. I always joke and say, coaching is part coaching the sport, part therapist. It's kind of a mix. You have to help. I mean, they have big emotions and they're trying to process it. And they're always right. They're always wanting to know, do I belong? And when they do feel safe, this team has blossomed. They come together. They get in a big circle. They cheer for one another. They take care of each other. If somebody does do something that is a mistake, they pick each other up. They're always there, and it's amazing what you can do when you create that safe space.
Let's look at the other side of that, right? Let's look at the coaches that scream and yell when the child is looking to them to know it's okay to fall. Mm-hmm. It's okay to make a mistake. What shame is centered. So as we're talking about what creates safe spaces, let's talk also about, what creates unsafe spaces. And it's situations like that.
Absolutely.
Well, let's think about that even if you take it into the workspace, right? Not only a little league team, but as adults in a workspace, right? Mm-hmm. When you're learning something new at work or in life in general, right? When you have a team around you and a boss or a manager that encourages you to learn new things and have a successful team around you, man, it's so much more fun to go into that place and learn new things versus a boss that is, that yelling coach that just tells you to get it done and throws new things at you, but doesn't give you the training or learning on how to do it. Right. And I don't care how old you are, you still want that support. You still want that positive feedback. You still want that supportive team around you. Right. It doesn't matter where you're at. So it's not just a young kid learning a new sport. It's anybody that's learning anything new or trying to develop something new. So,
well, that's why I want to apply that here in this community of awakening and the creation of a whole different earth than what we currently experience. And we all know that there's a significant amount of individual inner work that has to happen. But if it can be done in community, and you have that people that are willing to listen, people that are willing to support you, people that are willing to let you have because your experience is different than theirs, but be able to express that and be present with you and share their thoughts and their feelings about what they're going through, which is what we're doing here, very honestly. It's going to help people do the difficult inner work that it's going to take then to that will ultimately change the earth, the world that we're in today, which is what this is all about. This is why I believe the universe, the divine, is motivating us to do this, to create this content, to create these podcasts and books and classes that we're ultimately going to be creating, is to give people and to teach people how to do this in a safe way and with other people so that they know they're not alone. You're not alone in this. What you're feeling is not unique. It's not bad. It may be different, but it's not bad. Right? And everybody here, every one of us has value. We all have something to contribute to this. All of us. That's why I love the fact that we are a diverse group. Just the 5 or 4 of us when we're together is a very diverse group of people with a wide range of experience and knowledge. And if you're listening to this, I think you'll sense that. And you're going to resonate with one of the 4 or 5 of us because of where you are. And hopefully it makes you feel safe as you're listening to, oh, wait, I had that same thinking. I feel the same way. And if we touch one person through this, to me, that's value. And that makes this all worthwhile. So listening obviously is critical, in creating this environment. If people aren't willing to listen and actively listen, we've touched on that, I think, a few times, and recognize that everybody has something they can contribute. Everybody does. So Purna, in your healing work and in the communities that you've specifically created, what have you seen that allows people to feel safe enough to do what we're doing, to be open and to connect or reconnect if they feel that they're not connected?
I think in the spaces that I've curated over the years and been a part of over the years, what I notice is, especially in groups that meet more than once, right? The first session, it tends to be internal. They're not going to express as much vulnerability. They're taking the temperature of the space, of me as a space holder, of the other participants. And then what we see as we show up over and over and over, the guard begins to come down for some of them. There is a relationability, right? There's a sense of, again, we tend to feel alone in our suffering. It's this interesting psychological phenomenon, right? That I'm suffering and I'm the only one suffering this thing, and no one else on the planet in history has suffered this experience. And we start sharing and we realize, oh my gosh, like you just said, Jeff, oh, you too. You mean it's not just me. And so I think sometimes a sense of belonging comes from a sense of shared suffering, right? Joel touched on that. And the shared humanity. And so we begin to, there's always one person in the group that tends to be the icebreaker that begins to step out of their comfort zone and become vulnerable and become comfortable with being uncomfortable and being seen. And then that usually starts to open folks up. So I think one thing is consistency, repetition. Continue showing up, right? We don't, like we talked to Jeff before the podcast, we don't pick up the instrument and learn to play immediately. There's something about showing up time and time again in shared spaces that allows us to practice, lift that weight of becoming vulnerable and allowing yourself to be seen. And then you look around and you're like, wait, nothing happened. Right? Just like the child that falls on the field and looks to Joel and he's there lovingly. And so, wait, okay, nothing happened. I'm safe. I can do this again.
Get back up.
I can get back up. Yeah.
So in my organizational development training and experience, there's something we call the stages of group development, right? So you have forming, storming, norming, performing. And then if you're a temporary group, you may adjourn, right? If you're a standing group, you don't, you just continue. But what you've described there is the fact that, early on, you're forming as you don't really know each other well because you're feeling each other's knowledge and experiences out. And you're trying to understand where you fit in the group, which, to be very honest, that's exactly what we've been going through here collectively, right? And it's fun to watch as someone who has experience with it because you can see the group as they learn each other and they learn the strengths and weaknesses of the others, how they pick each other up. They start supporting one another. And it's funny because I'll watch one of you sometimes struggle with something you want to say, and then someone else will kind of say, "Hey, well, you know what?" And then next thing you know, the two together have come up with the right thought. And so now it's getting through that process of forming, storming, where you're starting to express your individuality. It may be different. You may have a different opinion than one of the people in the group, and you have to figure out how to make that fit, right? But all of that is managed by a facilitator. So here's what I want to touch on. This is probably the most empowering training I've ever gotten, was to learn to be a facilitator. And that's really what I want this awakening heaven on earth concept to become, is to be able to train people how to become a facilitator, how to facilitate people as we're going collectively through the awakening process, so that people they can feel comfortable and feel like they're in a safe space and that someone is guiding and helping, and they know that it's a coaching. You're really coaching, right? And that's really Purna and Joel and Joe and Sherry. What we want to build here is a facilitation, teaching people to facilitate this process and help people get through this, because it's not easy. It's not easy. If it's done well and done deeply, it's going to be a lot of work and difficult things that you go through.
Well, it's uncomfortable because you lose your sense of belonging. You had an identity wrapped around something else previously, and it's not fitting how you're feeling. And as you go through that, you lose that identity. You lose that sense of belonging with who you knew before. So it becomes very uncomfortable, very vulnerable. And you have to fight through that. Otherwise, you're going to go right back into old habits, into old identities.
Well, it's easier to move along the journey when you have people there to support you. And if you do fall, as we've said, someone there to pick you up. The scriptures talk about a twofold cord is strong. A threefold cord is even stronger, right? And when you can bind with one another and have that partnership in developing, and to me, it's age in it doesn't. I'm older than all of you, but I learn from each one of you, regardless. So, there are people who can be more mature spiritually and be younger. I think that's an important concept to remember. Age is not the determining factor here.
Gray hair is not a crown of wisdom.
Not always.
Not always.
Although in my case it is. Just
all that gray hair.
I'm just saying. Yeah, all the gray hair you can't see on my head. This is why it's really good right now. The podcast is probably all audio. Just saying. Right. So I do have a face for radio, by the way. So I want to kind of take us into this next section because I think it's essential. And this is the misunderstanding that unity requires that everybody be the same. And Purna, you've already touched on this. True unity actually thrives when there's diversity because it's so much more interesting. It is so much more beautiful. So how do we learn to create community where people can disagree without disconnecting from each other? That's what we're suffering today. People have different opinions, but they can't stay connected. That's why our world feels like it does today.
Well, I think, again, it goes back to things we've already touched upon, that internal critic and judge. I used to be very judgmental of others, and it's because my inner world was so unsafe, because I was disconnected from my own wholeness. I hadn't accepted my own shadow, my own multifaceted nature. And so the more I can do the inner work of self-acceptance and self-love, the more that inner critic and that self-judge softens, so that I can hold safe space and I can reflect and be present for others to come into their own belonging, their own wholeness. And then, like an organism, right? I'm doing my own thing and you're doing your own thing, but then we create this organism and this collective of diverse individuals that are mirroring to one another and present for one another, and strengthening our differences with one another in relation to one another. But we still have our own sense of self. So I'm not going to lose myself in you, and I'm not going to judge you for being different than me, but rather we can create that commune, that community, and that safe space and be unique.
Yeah, we have to learn how to disagree without dehumanizing each other. That's what I think we've gotten to as a collective. We tend to think that the other person is not correct, or that they're wrong, or that they're not good enough, that we're better than them, or whatever it might be, and that's all just judgment. And diversity is absolutely huge, because community built on sameness isn't going to survive for long, because as soon as something comes along that threatens whatever you are, it's going to fall apart. Diversity allows communities to be stronger, because we realize that, hey, this particular thing doesn't work, but this person's figured out how to do it differently. And it allows you to learn from that person how to bring that into your life. Because if we were all the exact same, all it would take is one thing to figure out what would make it fail, and the entire thing fails. So diversity brings strength. And when there's a diverse community, it's usually a lot stronger.
If I may, really quickly, sorry, Joe. We just finished up Peace is Every Step by Thich Nhat Hanh in my book club. And there is a section toward the end of the book about interbeing. And he said there needs to be a new word about interbeing. And he says here, we need the vision of interbeing. We belong to each other. We cannot cut reality into pieces. The well-being of this is the well-being of that. So we have to do things together. Every side is our side. There is no other side. There is no evil side.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that, just like both of you said, you have to have differences, in your community. It will make your community stronger. It allows you to see the same thing from different viewpoints, right? So that when you have those problems, you have more views, more viewpoints to see the solution. But the problem is a lot of times people don't have the skills to work through the solutions together. They get defensive. They get they don't know how to understand that when somebody comes with a solution that's not theirs, how to work through that issue with somebody against the problem, right? They think that somebody's attacking them then and saying, well, that's not right. That's not how you fix this. And what they need to understand is they need to learn how to work together against the problem and not against each other, right? There's a good book called Getting to Yes, I believe is the book title. I don't remember who wrote it. I'll find it here before the end of this question. But I think that coming at this to be tough on problems but easy on people is the important thing to think about. Have empathy, come at things with an open mind. I think really that and with come at everything with open communication.
You know what you just described though is that is actually the specific role of a facilitator. A facilitator's job is to take a diverse group of people with a diverse group of thoughts and to focus them on a common problem or issue and to help them work together to come up with a solution that is acceptable to all. Now, that being said, there's a difference in decision making. You know, consensus does not mean everybody is in full agreement with the ultimate decision. To your point, it's getting people to say yes, right? Now, I can't have consensus if someone has not had the opportunity to express their different opinion. And then say, even though I have a different opinion, I recognize and value the decision being made, and I will support it and not undermine it, even though it's different than what I personally would have chosen to do. Now, that takes emotional intelligence, emotional maturity, and a facilitator's job is to help to develop that and work that and to pull that out of people because it's there. They just maybe haven't experienced it yet enough that they know that. So again, to me, and I'm seeing a theme here as I'm going through this myself, I'm learning this morning about the importance of the role and the process of facilitation and how if we can help grow that and develop that as part of this awakening, heaven on earth, then that is going to be a big help to the global awakening that I think we're being asked to be a major part of here. So a facilitator's job is to allow difference without having division and to protect people in the group from attack. It strengthens diversity because it pulls diversity out of the group. You're pulling thoughts out that other people would not normally have shared through the way you facilitate the discussion. And it's about gaining acceptance, not necessarily full agreement, and being okay that you can accept the group's decision and not always be in full agreement with what is being done, right?
And again, I think through that whole process as well, everybody's learning, right? Throughout the whole thing, you get to learn from each other's viewpoints and it just expand the knowledge, right? So I think sometimes, go ahead.
Well, you're right. And you were talking about the book, Getting to Yes.
Mm-hmm.
The other type of decision making, you have consensus and then you have what's called concordance. Concordance is when everybody has to say yes. There can be no waffling on the decision. Everybody has to say yes. And if everybody does not say yes, you do not have concordance. You may have consensus, but you don't have concordance. So decision making is interesting because this is where we break apart. When people disagree about decisions that are being made, right? This is splintering. And how do you not splinter when a decision gets made that's different than what you would have personally made on your own?
That book, by the way, is by Roger Fisher and William Ury.
Great. I love it when we can put books out there for people to read. We're all readers, right? So yeah. I think that's important. So let's jump into this last section today, talking about, how do we create heaven on earth together? It's not something one person can do alone. I can't do this on my own. You can't do it on your own. We have to do it through relationships. We have to do it through community. That's the only way we're going to create heaven on earth is through community, and a community that we build together. We have to do it together. So, what actions can we take? How do we heal community today? What would our neighborhoods, workplaces, and schools and communities look like if they were built around unity rather than competition?
I think first and foremost, we come back to a matriarchal sense of support, of leadership. And when I say that, it doesn't mean men versus women. We talked about this, Jeff and I did, in a couple podcasts ago with the masculine and feminine. The patriarchal model, and especially the toxic patriarchal model that we see systems and organizations under now, that we see dismantling, is power over. And the matriarchal model is power with. And so within the matriarchal model, we centralize the most vulnerable. And so we take care of the underserved in our community. We take care of the vulnerable. We don't see that vulnerability. We don't see the underserved populations in our community as weak individuals. We see them as folks that we can help rise up. Right. There's a beautiful organization in Dayton called the House of Bread, and they serve a warm meal 365 days a year. And I've done a lot of volunteer work with them over the years. And I'm going to get my son involved this summer with them. And so I think, what we can actually do in our community is selfless service. Everyone has something to give. And in the yogic tradition, they say the quickest way to extinguish our own karmic debts is service to others. And so check in with yourself and see what you have to give, whether it's time or it's money or it's lending a hand, right? Maybe you're a builder and you want to go to Habitat for Humanity and help them build homes. But there are ways in which we can support the most vulnerable and centralize them. And I think that will elevate the sense of community and belonging across the board.
Before I let Joel answer, I have to point out that this week, as I've transitioned from my full-time work now into this more full-time, I'm going to be, Joel's wife Jessica is going to be joining as a part of our group of Awakening Heaven on Earth. It's a nonprofit. And our goal here is to create a model in our own community here in Lebanon initially that's doing exactly what you're talking about. And that is, there are a lot of wonderful groups here that do beautiful and wonderful things, but they're all functioning in a silo. There's not someone that is like an umbrella that's pulling them all together to make it easier for those that are in the most vulnerable positions to get access to all of the resources that are actually available they don't know about. And I watched her face light up when she sensed the service and the help that she's going to be able to give in that role. It makes me tear up to think about it because, and I said, this is what church should be. It's service. It's all about the service.
Yeah, that's what's been lost. It's no longer, church shouldn't be just going to church meetings and listening to a specific person preach about something. And then you go home and you go back to your normal day. And it's only happening in that space, and then after you leave that space, you don't ever carry it out into the world, and it's completely waste of time if you don't actually put it into work or into service. But I think building communities, it doesn't come from grand gestures. It comes in little moments, checking in on people, asking how they're doing, listening to their conversation a little longer than you want to. You know, I had that. I built community just in a pharmacy with my patients. You know, they're telling me about their health history or their parent they're taking care of, whatever it might be. And I'm crazy busy and have things I need to do, but I'll sit there and listen to them. And you build that connection with people. And that's one of the hardest things when I left being in an actual pharmacy setting is those people who I connected with. And they still reach out and they ask questions, or if I see them, it's just picked up the conversation. So you build community that way. And that's just a microcosm of a bigger picture that we're talking about here. But I think you heal community by, having a different mindset of not how do we get ahead, but how do we thrive together? I think that's what kind of you're touching on there. Not that these nonprofits or these other organizations are competing with one another, but they're just focused on just themselves.
Well, in some cases they do, because they have somewhat of a scarcity mentality, where they think that the resources are limited and they all have to fight for the same resources. Right. When in reality, if we were to pool all their resources, if we were to pool the capabilities, we will be strong. They would be stronger together than they would be individually. Right. And I think that's kind of and it all has to be built under the correct intention of love and service. And, I think of the concept of no one in our community should be left behind. Nobody. Everybody is sacred. Every human is sacred. You have to be judging them to think that they're not.
So the small little things, I think it's just, build the relationships around you. I know that's not a small thing, but you can start by doing that, by meet the people around you, meet the people in your neighborhood, meet the people at work. If you haven't met the people who you work with, meet them, introduce yourself, right? When you're walking through your neighborhood, when you're driving through your neighborhood, right? You see people, smile, wave, start building those relationships around you. Say hello, hold the door for people, right? Just be kind. Take the cart from somebody at the grocery store that's walking back, say, let me get that for you. Just do kind gestures in general. When you're, in the neighborhood, it also comes from changing your thinking about what you're doing in different situations, right? And just changing your attitude in different circumstances. In your neighborhood, change your thoughts from "this is my property" to "this is our community," right? This is our neighborhood. Change your thoughts at the workplace from "how do I get ahead" to "how do we all succeed together," right? Change your thought at school, right? If you're in school, from "your success doesn't threaten mine, it strengthens it," and then in your community, think we may see differently, but we're not enemies, right? We're all in this together. And change your mindset about how you see things, because we're all one, right? We need to all start thinking about that and believe in it.
Well, it's the essence of what we're trying to create here. I'm very excited. I'm very excited about where this is going. I'm excited. I love these conversations, and I think it's critical that we get more people into this conversation. And as we bring this conversation to a close, maybe we need to understand that belonging is not something we find. It's really something that we create. We create it. We are creators. If belonging is the way you think versus separation, if connection is the way you think and feel, and it's the way you use words, which we know are spells, it'll be magical how connection will happen. Every time we listen to someone, every time we welcome somebody, every time we choose to be curious instead of judgmental, there's the Ted Lasso statement, right? We create more space for others to come home. So Purna, Joel, Joe, as always, thank you so much for sharing this space this morning and this time. And to everyone listening, I hope that you can remember, if nothing else, you are not alone. I love the song that we've got from the Unity album, You Are Not Alone. It's the first song on the album, and it means so much. So I hope you'll take some time maybe to go out and download the Unity album off of either iTunes or Spotify or Amazon or YouTube and listen to that and know that you belong. You belong. Everybody has purpose and value, and together we become a community, the community that we have been seeking and searching for. And with that, the space between continues. As we come to a close, remember that this journey continues in many expressions. This podcast is part of a family of partner podcasts. Awakening Heaven on Earth. The space between heaven and earth and Living Heaven on Earth are 3 companion podcasts exploring spiritual awakening from complementary perspectives. Awakening Heaven on Earth offers the core teachings and mystical reflections on unity, love, and conscious living. The space between creates room for dialogue, reflection, and lived conversation around those teachings. Living Heaven on Earth focuses on basic spiritual practices that help embody these insights in daily life. Together, they form a unified journey of understanding, experience, and integration, inviting listeners to remember their connection with the divine, with one another, and with the living world. You can find all of them available on the same podcast streaming platforms wherever you listen. And if music helps carry these teachings deeper into the heart, the Unity, Awakening Heaven on Earth album is available on all major music streaming services as a musical companion to this journey. Wherever you engage, through listening, reflection, conversation, or music, may it gently remind you you are not separate. You belong to the one life, and heaven is already unfolding within you. Until next time, walk gently, love deeply, and embody heaven on earth.